My name is Zara Blackwood, and at 29, I finally achieved what I'd been working towards since I was 12 years old. I opened Crescent Moon Bakery, the small neighborhood shop I'd dreamed of running for nearly 2 decades. After months of renovation, recipe testing, and sleepless nights, my grand opening was set for Saturday morning at 9 a.m. I sent personalized invitations to every family member 3 weeks in advance, complete with the address, parking instructions, and a heartfelt note about how much their support would mean to me. Saturday morning arrived. The display cases were filled with my signature pastries, the espresso machine was steaming, and fresh flowers adorned every table. I stood behind the counter at 8:55 a.m., adjusting my apron for the 10th time, watching the door for familiar faces. By noon, I had served dozens of neighbors and strangers, but not a single family member had walked through my door. Before I tell you how this day revealed the true nature of my family relationships, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should care most about your dreams. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, the middle child of 3 in the Morrison household. My father, Richard Morrison, built his identity around being a successful insurance claims adjuster. He worked for Metropolitan Life for over 20 years, climbing the corporate ladder with methodical precision. Dad measured everything by financial return on investment, risk assessment, and what he called practical outcomes. He drove the same reliable sedan for 15 years, kept detailed spreadsheets of household expenses, and never bought anything without comparing prices at 3 different stores. My mother, Vivian, worked as a hospital billing coordinator, a job that suited her obsession with order and efficiency. She organized our family life like a military operation, color-coded calendars, meal plans prepared weeks in advance, and strict schedules for everything from homework time to weekend chores. Mom took pride in running what she called a well-managed household, where unexpected expenses were viewed as personal failures and spontaneous decisions were actively discouraged. My older brother Camden, now 32, followed the path our parents had laid out perfectly. He graduated with an accounting degree, married his college girlfriend Rebecca within 2 years, and now works at a mid-level consulting firm downtown. Camden and Rebecca live in a beige suburban house with a 2-car garage and host dinner parties where they discuss property taxes and retirement planning. They have 2 well-behaved children who attend the same elementary school Camden went to, creating what our parents consider the ideal family continuation story. My younger sister Delilah, 26, chose a different but equally approved route. She became a registered nurse, married a respiratory therapist named Kevin, and they bought a sensible townhome near the medical complex where they both work. Delilah approaches relationships with the same clinical efficiency she brings to patient care, organized, predictable, and focused on measurable outcomes. She sends birthday cards exactly 2 weeks early and brings the same store-bought dessert to every family gathering. I was the anomaly. While my siblings collected degrees in practical fields, I was experimenting with flour ratios in our kitchen. While they discussed career advancement strategies, I was sketching bakery layouts in my school notebooks. While they saved money in sensible investment accounts, I was spending my part-time job earnings on baking equipment and specialty ingredients. My passion for baking started when I was 12 during a summer visit to my grandmother's house in rural Montana. Grandma Rose had learned to bake during the Depression, when wasting ingredients wasn't an option and every meal had to stretch to feed unexpected guests. She taught me that baking was both science and art. Precise measurements mattered, but so did intuition, patience, and the ability to adjust when things didn't go according to plan. Cooking feeds the body, Grandma Rose told me as we shaped cinnamon rolls together. But baking feeds the soul. When you give someone fresh bread, you're giving them comfort, warmth, and a piece of your heart. Those summers at Grandma Rose's house were the happiest memories of my childhood. She never questioned my interest in what my parents called domestic hobbies. Instead, she taught me advanced techniques, shared family recipes written on index cards yellowed with age, and listened to my dreams about someday opening my own bakery. When I was 16, she gave me her grandmother's rolling pin, carved from maple wood and worn smooth by generations of use. "This will be yours when you're ready," she said, wrapping it carefully in a flour sack towel. "Keep it safe until you have your own kitchen where it belongs." My family's reaction to my baking interest ranged from mild amusement to outright disapproval. Dad frequently calculated how much I was spending on ingredients and suggested I channel my creativity into something more financially viable. "Hobbies are fine," he would say, "but you need to focus on building marketable skills." Mom approached my passion with her typical efficiency mindset, suggesting I take a few business courses so I could understand the practical side of food service. She meant well, but her advice always felt like attempts to make my dream fit into a more acceptable framework rather than genuine support for what I actually wanted to do. My siblings were even less supportive. Camden viewed my baking as a phase I would eventually grow out of once I faced real-world responsibilities. He often made comments about the restaurant industry's high failure rate and suggested I consider accounting instead, since I was already good with measurements and following directions. Delilah's nursing background made her focus on health concerns, constantly pointing out the sugar content in my creations and suggesting I develop more nutritious alternatives if I was serious about professional baking. She meant this helpfully, but it felt like criticism of the very thing that brought me joy. Despite their lukewarm support, I pursued my dream methodically. I worked at a local bakery throughout high school and community college, learning production techniques and customer service while earning money to buy professional equipment. I took business classes part-time and spent weekends at farmers markets, selling my pastries to build a customer base and refine my recipes. When I was 24, Grandma Rose passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. At the funeral, my family focused on practical matters, settling her estate, deciding what to do with her house, organizing her belongings efficiently. But when the lawyer read her will, I learned that she had left me $15,000 specifically designated for Zara's bakery fund. She talked about your bakery dreams every time we visited, the lawyer explained. She wanted to make sure you had a proper start. This inheritance became the foundation for everything that followed. I added it to my own savings and spent the next 5 years working 2 jobs, maintaining my position at the local bakery while also working nights at a catering company. Every dollar I earned went toward my bakery fund, building the capital I would need to lease space, buy equipment, and cover operating expenses during the crucial early months. Finding the right location took over a year of searching. I needed somewhere affordable but with good foot traffic, large enough for a proper kitchen but small enough to feel cozy and welcoming. When I found the corner space on Maple Street, with its large windows and exposed brick walls, I knew it was perfect. The rent was manageable, the neighborhood was experiencing growth with young families and working professionals, and most importantly, it felt like the kind of place Grandma Rose would have loved. The renovation process took 4 months and consumed nearly every dollar I had saved. I did as much work myself as possible, painting walls, refinishing the original hardwood floors, and installing simple shelving. For the major work, plumbing for the espresso machine, electrical for the commercial ovens, and health department compliance updates, I hired contractors, carefully managing costs while ensuring everything met professional standards. During this time, my family's reaction was mixed at best. Dad insisted on reviewing my business plan and lease agreement, pointing out potential problems and suggesting I negotiate different terms. While his advice was sometimes helpful, it always came with underlying skepticism about the venture's viability. The restaurant business is notoriously difficult, he reminded me repeatedly. Most new establishments fail within the first year. Are you certain you want to risk your grandmother's inheritance on something so uncertain? Mom's approach was to offer practical help that somehow felt more stressful than supportive. She researched health department regulations, created filing systems for my business documents, and suggested I develop detailed contingency plans for various failure scenarios. Her intentions were good, but her focus on potential problems rather than possibilities felt discouraging. Camden and Rebecca visited the space once during renovation. They spent most of the time discussing property values in the neighborhood and whether I was paying too much rent for the square footage. Camden suggested I consider a smaller space or perhaps partner with an existing business rather than taking on the full risk myself. Delilah's concerns centered on work-life balance and the physical demands of bakery ownership. You'll be working 7 days a week, she warned. When will you have time for relationships or starting a family? You need to think about your long-term personal goals, not just business ones. None of them seemed to understand that this wasn't just a career choice for me. It was the fulfillment of a dream that had sustained me through years of preparation and sacrifice. They saw risk and uncertainty where I saw opportunity and purpose. 3 weeks before my grand opening, I sent personalized invitations to every family member. These weren't simple announcements. I spent hours crafting individual notes for each person, explaining how much their presence would mean to me and how excited I was to share this milestone with them. I included detailed information about the opening day schedule, the address with parking instructions, and even a small map showing the bakery's location. For Dad, I wrote about how his business advice had helped me develop a solid financial foundation. For Mom, I mentioned how her organizational skills had inspired my systematic approach to menu planning and inventory management. For Camden and Rebecca, I highlighted the family-friendly atmosphere I was creating, perfect for bringing their children. For Delilah and Kevin, I noted the healthy options I had developed alongside traditional pastries. The responses I received were polite, but non-committal. Dad replied that he would try to stop by if time permits. Mom said she had marked it on her calendar, but reminded me that Saturday mornings were when she did her weekly grocery shopping. Camden mentioned that the kids had soccer games that day, but they might swing by afterward if they weren't too tired. Delilah said she was working a hospital shift Friday night and might be too exhausted Saturday morning, but she would see how she felt. Nobody said they would definitely be there. Nobody asked what they could do to help. Nobody seemed to understand that this was the most important day of my professional life. The week leading up to opening day was a whirlwind of final preparations. I perfected my signature items, maple pecan scones, lavender honey cookies, and what would become my most popular item, cinnamon cardamom rolls made using a variation of Grandma Rose's original recipe. I hired 2 part-time employees, high school students who were eager to learn and genuinely excited about being part of a new business. Local media showed interest in the story. A young entrepreneur opening a neighborhood bakery with family recipes and a focus on community connection. The Denver Post food writer scheduled a visit for opening week, and the neighborhood newsletter featured a preview article that generated genuine enthusiasm from residents I hadn't even met yet. Despite this outside support, I found myself most nervous about my family's reaction. Their approval had always been difficult to earn, tied to achievements that fit their definition of success. But this bakery represented everything I had worked for, everything Grandma Rose had believed I could accomplish. Surely they would recognize the significance of this moment and show up to support me. Friday night before opening day, I stayed at the bakery until nearly midnight, making final adjustments to the display cases and reviewing my prep list one more time. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for the paying customers, but for my family members who would finally see what I had been building toward all these years. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical November weather in Denver. I arrived at the bakery at 5 a.m. to begin final preparations, turning on ovens, starting the espresso machine, and arranging fresh flowers I had picked up from the wholesale market. By 8 a.m., the display cases were filled with beautiful pastries, the coffee was brewing, and warm light spilled from the windows onto the sidewalk. At 8:55 a.m., I positioned myself behind the counter, wearing the apron Grandma Rose had embroidered for me during my last summer visit. It was cream-colored with small blue flowers and my initials stitched in elegant script. I checked my appearance in the mirror one last time, smoothed my hair, and waited for my family to arrive before I officially opened to the public. 9 a.m. came and went. The first customers were neighbors I had met during renovation, Mrs. Patterson from the apartment building next door, and the young couple who lived above the bookstore across the street. They were enthusiastic and complimentary, purchasing coffee and pastries while expressing excitement about having a bakery in the neighborhood. 9:30 a.m. More customers arrived. People who had read about the opening in the neighborhood newsletter, parents with children attracted by the welcoming window displays, and a few food enthusiasts who had heard about my cinnamon cardamom rolls. Still no family. I kept watching the door while serving customers, expecting to see familiar faces at any moment. Surely they were just running late. Perhaps Camden's soccer game had been delayed, or Mom's grocery shopping was taking longer than expected.
10 Uhr morgens, 11 Uhr morgens, noon.
By 1 p.m., the lunch crowd had arrived and departed. I had served nearly 50 customers, received countless compliments on both the food and the atmosphere, and sold out of 3 different pastry varieties. Local customers were already asking about tomorrow's specials and weekly hours. The opening was a clear success by any objective measure. But not a single member of my family had appeared. At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with the first family communication of the day. A text from Mom. Hope opening day went well. Very busy with weekend errands. We'll try to visit next week. 20 minutes later, Camden sent a message. Sorry we missed today. Kids were exhausted after soccer, and Rebecca had a headache. Looks like you had a good turnout based on your social media posts. Dad's message came at 3 p.m. Congratulations on making it through your first day. Remember that the real test will be maintaining consistent customer traffic over the coming months. Delilah didn't message at all. As closing time approached at 6 p.m., I realized that my family's absence wasn't due to unexpected delays or scheduling conflicts.
It was a choice.
Each of them had chosen other priorities over supporting me on the most important day of my business life. That evening, alone in my apartment with a box of leftover pastries that had been intended as gifts for family members, I called the one person I knew would understand my disappointment. "Charlotte," I said when my best friend answered. "How did today go?" Charlotte had been my closest friend since college, the one person who had never questioned my bakery dreams or suggested I pursue something more practical. She worked as a social worker, understood the value of following your passion, and had been incredibly supportive throughout my entire journey. It was amazing and horrible at the same time, I told her honestly. The customers loved everything. I sold almost completely out, and people are already talking about becoming regulars. But my entire family skipped it. There was a moment of silence before Charlotte responded. All of them. Every single person. They all had excuses, but the truth is they just didn't think it was important enough to prioritize. Charlotte sighed. "I'm so sorry, Zara. That must have felt awful on what should have been a celebration day. The worst part is I'm not even surprised," I admitted. "I keep expecting them to disappoint me, and they keep meeting those expectations." "What are you going to do?" That question would haunt me for the next several days as I processed the emotional reality of my family's absence. But in that moment, exhausted and hurt, I could only give her an honest answer. "I'm going to keep baking," I said. "Because this bakery isn't about them anymore. It's about me, and it's about the customers who did show up today, and it's about continuing what Grandma Rose started." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my small apartment at the business plans, recipes, and photographs documenting my journey to this point. Tomorrow I would open again, and the day after that, and the day after that. My family's absence had hurt deeply, but it had also clarified something important. My worth wasn't determined by their approval, and my success didn't require their participation. The real story was just beginning. The week following my grand opening established a routine that both thrilled and exhausted me. Regular customers began emerging. Mrs. Patterson became a daily coffee customer who arrived precisely at 7:30 each morning. The bookstore couple stopped by every afternoon for tea and scones, and several neighborhood families discovered that my weekend cinnamon cardamom rolls were worth planning their Saturday mornings around. More importantly, I realized that running Crescent Moon Bakery was exactly what I had hoped it would be. The work was demanding. I arrived at 5 a.m. every day to begin baking, stayed until 7 p.m. to handle cleanup and prep for the next day, and spent Sunday evenings planning menus and managing inventory. But it was fulfilling in a way my previous jobs had never been. When customers' faces lit up tasting something I had created, when regulars asked about my weekend plans or shared stories about their own lives, when children pressed their faces against the display case in wonder, those moments made every early morning and aching foot worthwhile. My family's response to my opening day absence was exactly what I had expected, a mixture of defensive explanations and subtle criticism designed to make me feel unreasonable for being disappointed. Mom called on Tuesday evening with what she clearly considered a generous offer to make amends. "I can stop by this weekend to see how you're managing everything," she said. "I've been thinking about your inventory system, and I have some suggestions for improving efficiency." "That would be nice, Mom," I replied carefully. "But I'd prefer if you came as a customer first, rather than an efficiency consultant." "Well, of course," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't understand the distinction. "I just want to help you avoid common mistakes. Small businesses often fail because they don't establish proper operational systems early enough." Dad's approach was similar but focused on financial concerns. He called Wednesday morning during my busiest prep time. "I've been researching bakery profit margins," he announced without preamble. "Have you calculated your true hourly wages after factoring in ingredient costs, utilities, and lease payments? Most bakery owners make less than minimum wage when you account for all their hours." "Dad, I'm in the middle of mixing dough for tomorrow's bread orders," I said, trying to keep frustration out of my voice. "Can we discuss this later?" "This is exactly the kind of avoidance behavior that leads to business failure," he replied. "You can't just focus on the creative aspects and ignore the financial realities." Camden's response came via email, a detailed message that managed to be simultaneously apologetic and condescending. "Sorry again about missing Saturday. I know that was disappointing for you. Rebecca and I have been discussing your bakery situation, and we wanted to offer some perspective from our experience managing our household budget and long-term financial planning. The food service industry presents unique challenges that might not be apparent to someone without extensive business background. We'd be happy to review your business model and suggest modifications that might improve your success probability." The email continued for 3 more paragraphs. outlining their concerns about my lack of corporate experience and suggesting I consider franchising opportunities that would provide proven operational frameworks. Delilah's silence continued until Thursday, when she finally sent a brief text. Heard from Mom that the bakery is keeping you busy. Hope you're taking care of your health and not overworking yourself. None of these communications included congratulations on my successful opening week. None asked about my experience or expressed genuine interest in what I was building. Instead, they all focused on problems, concerns, and ways I should modify my approach to better align with their definition of responsible decision-making. By Thursday evening, I had reached a decision. I called Charlotte and asked if she wanted to meet for dinner. I need to talk through something important. I told her over Thai food at our usual restaurant. I think I'm done trying to win my family's approval. Charlotte set down her fork and looked at me seriously. That's a big statement. What happened? I shared the week's worth of communications, the underlying tone of disappointment and criticism, the complete absence of celebration or genuine support. It's like they can't see me as a successful business owner, I explained. They can only see problems to be fixed and mistakes to be avoided. Even when everything is going well, they focus on potential failure scenarios. How do you want to handle this going forward? I think I need to stop sharing details about the bakery with them, I said slowly, working through the idea as I spoke. Not completely cutting them off, but not seeking their approval anymore either. I'll give them surface-level updates when they ask, but I'm done hoping they'll suddenly become supportive. Charlotte nodded. That sounds emotionally healthy. You've proven the bakery can succeed on its own merits. You don't need their validation. The weird thing is, I feel relieved thinking about it this way. I continued. Like I've been carrying around this expectation that was making everything harder than it needed to be. Over the weekend, I had the opportunity to test this new approach. Mom and Dad both arrived Saturday afternoon, announcing they were there to evaluate my progress and offer assistance. They spent an hour critiquing various aspects of my operation. The display case arrangement wasn't optimal for impulse purchases. My pricing strategy didn't account for seasonal fluctuations in ingredient costs. My staff training procedures seemed informal compared to corporate standards. They offered these observations as helpful feedback, but the cumulative effect was to make me feel like my successful week had been a lucky accident rather than the result of careful planning and hard work. Thank you for the suggestions, I said when they finished their assessment. I'll consider which ones might be useful to implement. We're just trying to help you succeed, Dad said, clearly expecting more gratitude for their time and expertise. I know, I replied, and I appreciate you taking the time to visit. But I didn't promise to implement their suggestions, and I didn't ask for additional advice. For the first time in my adult life, I thanked my parents politely and then continued doing things my own way. The shift was subtle but profound. Instead of second-guessing my decisions based on their potential reactions, I focused on what worked for my customers and my business. Instead of seeking their approval for new menu items or operational changes, I trusted my own judgment and professional experience. This new approach was tested more significantly a month later, when I received an offer that would have thrilled my family, but felt completely wrong for me. Marcus Hoffman, the owner of 3 successful bakeries in downtown Denver, visited Crescent Moon on a busy Saturday morning. After observing my operations and sampling several menu items, he approached me with a proposition. You have real talent and a good location, he said. I'm interested in purchasing your business and incorporating it into my chain. You would stay on as manager with a generous salary and benefits, plus a percentage of profits. It would give you financial security without the risks of independent ownership. The offer was substantial, more money than I had ever imagined making, excellent benefits, and the backing of an established brand. A month earlier, I would have immediately called my family for advice, knowing they would unanimously encourage me to accept such a financially advantageous opportunity. Instead, I thanked Marcus for his interest and told him I needed time to consider the offer. Then I called Charlotte. It's a lot of money, I told her over coffee at a nearby cafe. And he's not wrong about the security benefits. But, Charlotte prompted, clearly sensing my hesitation. But it wouldn't be my bakery anymore. He showed me photos of his other locations, and they all look identical. Same menu, same layout, same corporate branding. Everything that makes Crescent Moon special would disappear. What does your gut tell you? That I didn't work this hard to build someone else's dream, I said immediately. I love what I've created here. I love the relationships with regular customers, the freedom to develop new recipes, the connection to this specific neighborhood. Selling would give me financial security, but it would also mean giving up everything that makes this work meaningful. Charlotte smiled. That sounds like your answer. I declined Marcus's offer the following Monday. When I mentioned this decision casually during my weekly check-in call with Mom, her reaction was exactly what I had expected, but no longer feared. "You turned down a guaranteed salary and benefits for what?" she said, her voice rising in disbelief. "Zara, this is exactly the kind of impractical thinking that worries us. You can't build a secure future on sentiment and emotion." "I'm building a secure future on my own abilities and hard work," I replied calmly. "The bakery is profitable, growing steadily, and personally fulfilling. Those are pretty good foundations for the future. But what if something goes wrong? What if the economy changes or competition increases? This man was offering you protection against those risks." "Every choice involves risk, Mom, including the choice to give up something you love for something that feels safer." We ended the conversation politely, but without resolution. Mom clearly thought I had made a terrible decision, and I was equally certain I had made the right choice for my life and values. This pattern continued over the following months as my business grew and evolved. I expanded my menu to include seasonal specialties, hired an additional part-time employee to handle increased weekend demand, and began offering custom cake services for special occasions. Each success was met with family responses that mixed mild pride with concerns about overextending myself or taking on too much risk. But their opinions no longer carried the weight they once had. I had learned to trust my own judgment and to measure success by my own standards rather than their approval. 6 months after opening, Crescent Moon Bakery had become an established neighborhood gathering place. Regular customers knew each other's names and often shared tables during busy periods. Children celebrated birthdays with my custom cupcakes, couples enjoyed weekend dates over coffee and pastries, and elderly residents found a warm, welcoming place to spend afternoon hours when their homes felt too quiet. The Denver Post food writer published a review in the spring, calling Crescent Moon a neighborhood gem that proves small-scale artisanal baking can thrive in an era of corporate chains. The review brought new customers from throughout the city and led to catering opportunities for local businesses and events. More importantly, I had built something that honored Grandma Rose's memory while creating new traditions and connections. Her rolling pin held a place of honor on a shelf behind the counter, and her cinnamon roll recipe, with my cardamom adaptation, had become the bakery's signature item. 1 year after opening, I hosted an anniversary celebration that filled the bakery with customers, neighbors, and friends who had become part of the Crescent Moon community. Charlotte helped me organize the event, and even some of my competitors from other neighborhood businesses stopped by to offer congratulations. My family received invitations to the anniversary party, but their responses followed familiar patterns. Mom and Dad said they would try to attend if their weekend schedule permitted. Camden and Rebecca mentioned potential scheduling conflicts with the children's activities. Delilah was working another weekend hospital shift. This time, their absence didn't hurt the way it had during my grand opening. I had learned that their support wasn't necessary for my success or happiness. The bakery's anniversary celebration was full of people who genuinely cared about what I had built and wanted to share in my achievement. As I looked around the crowded space that evening, customers laughing over shared desserts, children's faces smeared with frosting, friends catching up over coffee, I realized that I had found something more valuable than family approval. I had found purpose, community, and the satisfaction of creating something meaningful with my own hands and heart. Later that night, as I cleaned up after the celebration, I called Charlotte to debrief about the event. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked. "Grateful," I said without hesitation, "and proud, and excited about what comes next." "Any regrets about the family situation?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm sad that we can't share these moments together in the way I once hoped we could. But I'm not sad about choosing my own path or building something they don't understand. This bakery is exactly what I wanted it to be. Grandma Rose would be proud of you." "I think she would be," I agreed, looking at her rolling pin resting on its special shelf. I think she knew I would need to find my own way to make her lessons work in my life. As I turned off the lights and locked the door that night, I felt a deep sense of contentment about the choices I had made. The bakery was thriving, my relationships with customers and friends were genuine and fulfilling, and I had learned to trust my own judgment even when it conflicted with family expectations. The most important lesson I had learned wasn't about baking or business management. It was about the difference between seeking approval and building confidence. Approval from others is temporary and conditional, dependent on meeting their standards and expectations. Confidence comes from within, from knowing your own values and having the courage to follow them even when others don't understand. My family's absence from my grand opening had hurt deeply at the time, but it had also freed me from the exhausting cycle of trying to win their support for choices they would never fully understand or appreciate. In letting go of their approval, I had found something much more valuable: self-respect and the satisfaction of creating a life that aligned with my own dreams and values. 2 years after opening Crescent Moon Bakery, I received a call that would test everything I had learned about family relationships and personal boundaries. "Zara, it's Camden. I need to ask you for a favor." My brother's voice carried an unfamiliar tone, hesitant and nervous rather than his usual confident authority. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of my daily bread preparation, but something about his demeanor made me set down my mixing bowl and give him my full attention. "What's going on?" "Rebecca and I are getting divorced," he said quietly. "It's been building for months, and we finally made the decision to separate. The legal fees are substantial, and with splitting assets and establishing 2 households, I'm facing some significant financial pressure." This was genuinely shocking news. Camden and Rebecca had always presented themselves as the perfect couple with the ideal marriage and family structure. At every family gathering, they discussed their coordinated life plans with the confidence of people who had figured out the formula for success. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "That must be incredibly difficult, especially with the children involved." "It is," he admitted. "And that's why I'm calling. I know we haven't been as supportive of your bakery as we could have been, but I'm hoping you might be able to help me out financially. Just temporarily, until I get back on my feet." The request wasn't entirely unexpected. Camden had always viewed money as something family members should share during difficult times, though his definition of sharing had historically been quite one-sided. What surprised me was his acknowledgement, however brief, that he hadn't been supportive of my business. "How much are you thinking?" I asked. $15,000 would cover the lawyer retainer and first month's expenses for my new apartment. "I know it's a lot, but the bakery seems to be doing really well, and I promise I'll pay you back once everything is settled." The amount was significant, but not impossible. 2 years of steady growth had put Crescent Moon in a solid financial position, and I had been careful to maintain both business and personal emergency funds. From a purely practical standpoint, I could afford to lend him the money without jeopardizing my operations. But the request felt complicated by our history and his timing. "Camden, I need to think about this," I told him. "Can I call you back tomorrow?" "Of course," he said quickly. "And Zara, I really appreciate you considering it. I know I haven't been the most supportive brother, especially about your career choices." After hanging up, I found myself facing a decision that felt more complex than simple financial calculation. Camden was family, and he was genuinely in crisis. But he was also the same person who had missed my grand opening, questioned my business decisions, and suggested I pursue franchising opportunities because independent ownership was too risky. That evening, I met Charlotte for our weekly dinner to discuss the situation. "What's your gut reaction?" she asked after I explained Camden's request. "Part of me wants to help because he's my brother, and he's going through something awful," I said honestly. "But another part of me is frustrated that he's asking for my help now, when he couldn't spare a few hours to support me on my opening day." "Those feelings can both be true," Charlotte pointed out. "You can feel compassion for his situation and also feel hurt by his past behavior. The thing is, $15,000 would really help him, and I can afford it without damaging my business. If this was about anyone else, a friend, a neighbor, even a customer who was struggling, I think I'd find a way to help. But it's not about anyone else. It's about Camden, and your relationship with Camden has a specific history." I nodded, appreciating Charlotte's ability to help me think through complex emotions without telling me what to do. "There's something else," I continued. "If I lend him this money, what message does that send about our relationship? Does it mean I'm willing to be the family ATM when needed, even if I don't get support when I need it?" "That's a really important question. What do you think the message should be?" Over the next 24 hours, I wrestled with the decision from every angle. I considered the family dynamics, the practical implications, and most importantly, what choice would align with my own values and sense of integrity. Finally, I called Camden back. "I've thought about your request," I began, "and I want to help, but with some specific conditions." "Okay," he said, sounding hopeful but cautious. "I'll lend you $10,000, not 15. It should be enough to cover your immediate legal expenses and give you time to arrange longer-term financing for the rest." But I want a formal loan agreement with a realistic repayment schedule, and I want you to understand that this is a one-time thing. That's incredibly generous, Zara. Thank you. There's more, I continued. I also want to be honest about something that's been bothering me for 2 years now. When I opened the bakery, I sent everyone in the family personal invitations to the grand opening. Not a single person showed up. No one called to explain or apologize. It was one of the most important days of my professional life, and my entire family chose other priorities. Camden was quiet for a moment. I remember that day, he said finally. The kids did have soccer games, but you're right, we could have rearranged our schedule. I think we didn't understand how. I remember that day, he said finally. The kids did have soccer games, but you're right, we could have rearranged our schedule. I think we didn't understand how important it was to you. It wasn't just about that one day, I continued. It was about feeling like my dreams and achievements don't matter to this family unless they fit a specific mold. You're asking me to help you through a crisis, and I'm willing to do that because I care about you. But I need you to understand that support goes both ways. I get it, Camden said, his voice subdued. And I'm sorry, really sorry. Not just because I need help now, but because I should have been there for you then. Thank you for saying that. It means something. We arranged to meet that weekend to finalize the loan paperwork. Camden arrived at the bakery Saturday morning, during what was now my busiest time of the week. He waited patiently while I served the breakfast crowd, and I noticed him observing the interactions between me and my regular customers, the genuine warmth, the shared jokes, the sense of community that had developed over 2 years. When we sat down with the loan documents, he looked around the space with what seemed like genuine appreciation for the first time. This really is something special, he said quietly. I don't think I understood before what you were trying to create here. It's exactly what I dreamed it would be, I replied. It just took a while to get here. We signed the paperwork, I transferred the funds to his account, and then something unexpected happened. Camden ordered a coffee and one of my cinnamon cardamom rolls and sat at a corner table for nearly an hour, reading a book he had brought and occasionally chatting with other customers who were doing the same thing. When he left, he hugged me. Not the brief, obligatory family hug I was used to, but a real embrace that conveyed genuine gratitude and affection.
Thank you, he said.
Not just for the money, but for showing me what it looks like to build something meaningful. Over the following months, Camden became an occasional but regular customer. He would stop by on weekend mornings, sometimes with his children during his custody time, and gradually began to understand what I had created and why it mattered to me. More importantly, he began to see me as someone who had succeeded on my own terms rather than someone who had made questionable life choices. The shift in our relationship influenced other family dynamics as well. When Delilah heard about Camden's divorce and my financial assistance, she called to express both sympathy for his situation and appreciation for my generosity. I know we haven't been the most supportive family, she said during that conversation. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, especially after Camden told me about your conversation regarding the grand opening. It's been a process, learning to build relationships based on who we actually are rather than who we think we should be, I replied. Would it be okay if I came by the bakery sometime? Not to offer business advice or point out health concerns, but just to see what you've built and maybe understand it better. Delilah's visit the following week was revelation. She arrived during a quiet Tuesday afternoon and spent 2 hours sampling different menu items, talking with me about my daily routine, and observing the interactions between me and my staff. She asked thoughtful questions about my recipe development process and seemed genuinely impressed by the business I had built. I think I owe you an apology, she said as she prepared to leave. I've been so focused on the risks and challenges of what you were doing that I never took time to appreciate the skill and dedication required to do it well.
Thank you for saying that.
And thank you for taking the time to really see what this place is about. My parents' evolution was slower and more complicated, but even they began to shift their perspective as Camden and Delilah's attitudes changed. Dad started stopping by monthly to check on business performance, but his questions became less skeptical and more genuinely curious about my operations and growth strategies. He never admitted he had been wrong about my career choice, but he began referring to me as an entrepreneur rather than someone who owned a small food service establishment. Mom's transformation was perhaps the most significant. She began bringing friends to the bakery for what she called ladies' coffee dates, and I overheard her describing my business to them with unmistakable pride. She still couldn't resist offering occasional efficiency suggestions, but they came from a place of wanting to help rather than believing I was fundamentally unprepared for business ownership. 3 years after opening, I faced another major decision that would test both my growth as an individual and my family's evolution in supporting my choices. A national food magazine contacted me about featuring Crescent Moon in an article about innovative small bakeries across the country. The opportunity would bring significant publicity, but also the kind of attention that could dramatically change the intimate, neighborhood character of the bakery. When I mentioned this opportunity during a family dinner, the first such gathering I had attended in over a year, their responses reflected how much our relationships had changed. "That's incredible recognition," Camden said immediately. "Are you excited about it? What kind of impact do you think it will have on your daily operations?" Dad asked, a practical question, but delivered with curiosity rather than skepticism. "Will you be able to maintain your connection with regular customers if you get busier?" Delilah wondered aloud. These were thoughtful questions that showed they understood what mattered to me about the bakery, rather than simply projecting their own values onto my situation. "I'm conflicted," I admitted. "The recognition would be amazing, and it could open doors for future opportunities. But I love the community feel we have now, and I'm worried that too much growth too quickly could change what makes this place special." "What does your gut tell you?" Mom asked, a question I never would have expected from her 3 years earlier. "That I should probably do the feature, but be very intentional about managing the growth that comes afterward." The family dinner ended with everyone expressing confidence in my judgment and excitement about seeing my work recognized on a national level. It was the kind of support I had dreamed of receiving but had learned to live without. The magazine feature appeared 6 months later and did indeed bring significant attention to Crescent Moon. Food tourists began making special trips to try my cinnamon cardamom rolls. Weekend lines stretched out the door, and I received inquiries from potential investors interested in helping me expand to multiple locations. But I had learned enough about my own values and priorities to navigate the success without losing what mattered most to me. I hired additional staff to manage increased demand while maintaining quality, implemented a reservation system for weekend seating to ensure regular customers could still find space, and politely declined expansion opportunities that would have required giving up direct involvement in daily operations. Most importantly, I kept the bakery's essential character intact. It remained a place where neighbors gathered, where children celebrated birthdays, where people found comfort and connection over food made with care and attention. The financial success also allowed me to do something I had been dreaming about since the early days of the business. I established the Rose Morrison Foundation, named after my grandmother, to provide small business loans and mentorship to aspiring food entrepreneurs who came from non-traditional backgrounds. The foundation's first loan went to Maria Santos, a single mother who had been selling homemade tamales from her apartment and dreamed of opening a small restaurant. Watching her navigate the challenges of starting her business, seeing her face light up when her first customer walked through the door, remembering my own journey from dream to reality, these experiences reminded me why I had wanted to succeed in the first place. It wasn't just about proving myself or building something impressive. It was about creating meaningful work, fostering community connection, and using whatever success I achieved to help others pursue their own dreams. For years after opening Crescent Moon Bakery, I hosted another anniversary celebration. This time, my entire family attended. Not because they felt obligated, but because they genuinely wanted to share in my achievement and be part of the community I had built. Dad spent the evening chatting with regular customers about neighborhood development and local business trends. Mom helped serve refreshments and seemed to genuinely enjoy interacting with the diverse group of people who had become part of my extended family. Camden brought his children, who had become weekend regulars and knew several of my staff members by name. Delilah worked the crowd with natural ease, her nursing background making her comfortable connecting with people from all walks of life. But the most meaningful moment came when Charlotte stood up to make a toast. 4 years ago, Zara took an enormous risk, she began, speaking to the crowded bakery. She invested everything she had saved, plus her grandmother's inheritance, plus years of hard work and learning, into creating this place. But the biggest risk wasn't financial. It was the risk of believing in herself enough to build something authentic, something that reflected her own values and vision rather than other people's expectations. She paused to look at me directly. What she created isn't just a successful business. It's proof that following your passion, even when it doesn't make sense to other people, can lead to something beautiful and meaningful and lasting. The crowd applauded, but I found myself looking at my family members' faces. Dad was nodding thoughtfully. Mom had tears in her eyes. Camden was smiling with what looked like genuine pride. Delilah gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Well deserved." Later that evening, As we cleaned up after the celebration, Mom approached me with an envelope. "I found this while going through some old boxes," she said. "It's a letter your grandmother wrote to me shortly before she died. I thought you should have it." The letter was brief, but powerful. "Vivian, I know you worry about Zara's baking dreams. You want her to be practical and secure, and those are good instincts from a loving mother. But some people are meant to create beauty and bring joy to others, and Zara is one of those people." When she talks about her bakery plans, her whole face lights up with purpose and passion. That light is rare and precious. Please don't try to dim it in the name of safety. The world needs people like Zara, and she needs to follow this path to become who she's meant to be. Trust her judgment. She's wiser about her own heart than any of us could be. Reading Grandma Rose's words 4 years later, with the evidence of their truth all around us in the form of a thriving business and genuine community, felt like receiving a blessing I hadn't known I needed. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what she meant," Mom said quietly. "But I see it now. I see what you've built, and I see how happy it makes you. I'm proud of you, Zara. Not just proud of your success, but proud of your courage to follow your own path." As the last customers left that night, and my family helped me close up the bakery, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. It hadn't been the straight path I had once imagined, from family support to business success. Instead, it had been more complex and ultimately more valuable, a journey of learning to trust my own judgment, build authentic relationships, and create something meaningful regardless of external validation. The bakery's success hadn't changed my family members into different people. Dad was still analytical and risk-averse. Mom still valued efficiency and practical outcomes. Camden and Delilah still approached life with their own particular priorities and perspectives. But they had learned to see my choices through my own values rather than theirs. More importantly, I had learned to pursue my goals without needing their approval, which paradoxically made it possible for us to have more genuine relationships based on who we actually were rather than who we thought we should be. 5 years after opening Crescent Moon Bakery, I received a call that would close one circle while opening another. "Ms. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from the Colorado Small Business Association. I'm calling to inform you that you've been selected as this year's recipient of the Outstanding Small Business Owner Award. The ceremony is next month, and you're invited to give a keynote speech about your entrepreneurial journey." As I hung up the phone, I thought about the scared 29-year-old who had stood behind this same counter 5 years ago, watching the door for family members who never came. That version of myself had been heartbroken by their absence, but had somehow found the strength to continue anyway. Now I understood that their absence, while painful, had been a gift. It had forced me to find validation within myself and to build success on my own terms. It had taught me the difference between approval and respect, between conditional support and genuine love. The awards ceremony took place at the Denver Convention Center, with hundreds of business owners, community leaders, and family members in attendance. As I looked out at the audience before beginning my keynote speech, I saw my parents in the 3rd row, Camden and his children in the 5th row, Delilah and Kevin near the back. Charlotte was in the front row, beaming with pride. But I also saw Maria Santos, whose restaurant had become a neighborhood institution in her community. I saw 3 other Rose Morrison Foundation loan recipients who had successfully launched their own businesses. I saw Mrs. Patterson and several other regular customers who had driven downtown specifically to support me. The community I had built extended far beyond blood relations, and the success I was being recognized for meant more than individual achievement. It represented the power of following authentic passion, the value of persistence through difficulty, and the importance of using success to lift others up. As I began my speech, I thought about Grandma Rose and the legacy she had passed down, not just recipes and techniques, but the understanding that food made with love has the power to create connection, comfort, and community. 5 years ago, I opened a small bakery with big dreams and very little certainty about what lay ahead. What I discovered was that success isn't just about achieving your goals, it's about becoming the kind of person who can handle both failure and achievement with equal grace. I talked about the importance of perseverance, the value of authentic relationships, and the responsibility that comes with success. But mostly, I talked about the power of believing in yourself enough to pursue your dreams even when others don't understand them. The speech ended with enthusiastic applause, but the moment that meant the most came afterward, when my family surrounded me backstage. "We're so proud of you," Dad said, and for the first time, his pride felt completely genuine and unconditional. "You've accomplished something really remarkable," Mom added. Not just the business success, but the way you've stayed true to yourself throughout the process. Camden hugged me tightly. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to build something meaningful. It's influenced how I think about my own career and what I want to create in my life. Delilah's words were perhaps the most meaningful. You taught me that supporting someone doesn't mean trying to change their dreams to fit your comfort zone. It means trusting them to know their own heart and being there to celebrate when their dreams come true. As we left the convention center that evening, surrounded by family and friends who had learned to see my success through my own eyes rather than their expectations, I felt a deep sense of completion and gratitude. The journey from dream to reality had been longer and more complex than I had anticipated, filled with challenges I hadn't expected and rewards I couldn't have imagined. But every difficult moment had been worthwhile, not just for the external success it had produced, but for the internal growth it had required. I had learned to trust my own judgment, to value authentic relationships over convenient ones, and to measure success by my own standards rather than other people's approval. Most importantly, I had discovered that following your passion isn't just about personal fulfillment. It's about contributing something meaningful to the world and creating opportunities for others to do the same. The bakery that had started as one young woman's dream had become a community gathering place, a launching pad for other entrepreneurs, and proof that authentic passion pursued with dedication and integrity can create something lasting and beautiful. As Charlotte and I drove home that night, past the familiar streets of the neighborhood where Crescent Moon Bakery continued to serve daily bread and comfort to anyone who walked through its doors, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. So, what's next? Charlotte asked as we pulled into my driveway. I smiled, thinking about the foundation's growing impact, the bakery's continued evolution, and the family relationships that had transformed from sources of stress into genuine sources of support. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and start baking bread, I said. Same as I have every day for 5 years. Because this was never really about proving anything to anyone else. It was about creating something meaningful with my own hands and sharing it with people who appreciate it. And that's enough? That's everything, I replied, knowing that Grandma Rose would have understood exactly what I meant. The story ends here, but the bakery continues. Every morning, fresh bread emerges from the ovens. Every day, neighbors gather to share coffee and conversation. Every week, someone new discovers that food made with love really does feed the soul. And sometimes, late at night when the bakery is quiet and still, I can almost feel Grandma Rose's presence in the kitchen, smiling as she watches her granddaughter carry on the tradition of nourishing others through the ancient and beautiful art of baking. The family that once couldn't understand my dreams had learned to celebrate them. The business that started with one woman's vision had grown into a community institution. The young woman who once desperately needed approval had become someone who gave validation to others pursuing their own authentic paths. Dreams, it turns out, are not just about the destination. They're about who you become in pursuit of them and what you create along the way that outlasts your own involvement. 5 years after opening day, surrounded by family who had learned to love me as I am rather than who they thought I should be, I understood that the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or recognition. It's measured in lives touched, dreams encouraged, and communities strengthened through the simple act of showing up authentically, day after day, with whatever gifts you have to offer. That understanding, more than any award or achievement, felt like the true fulfillment of everything Grandma Rose had taught me about the power of love made visible through the work of our hands. If you've ever had to choose between following your dreams and meeting others' expectations, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Did you find your own version of chosen family along the way? What did you learn about the difference between approval and authentic support? Hit like if the story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life lessons about finding the courage to build the life you actually want rather than the one others expect you to live. Remember, your dreams deserve the same dedication you give to supporting others' expectations. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to succeed on your own terms and show them what's possible when someone refuses to give up on their authentic vision. Thank you for being part of this community, and may you find the strength to pursue whatever dream is calling to your heart.